Hello, and welcome to another interview powered by the RevOps Co-op. I'm Kamala Thompson, and today we're interviewing Olivier Labbé. Olivier, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. So I've been in tech for, I don't know, feels like 20 years now. I specialize in joining companies around product market fit and help them scale. So I've been fortunate to work for a bunch of really cool companies like Metadata, G2, Glassdoor, and FlipTop. And now I've recently joined a new startup called TestBox, and I'm overseeing a go-to-market early stage company, seed stage company that is in a building a new category. We have a marketplace component as well as demo automation capabilities for sales and marketing teams.
And we should talk about that offline later because I'm very interested to hear more. But before we go there, let's talk about, like you said, you've come from a background of very interesting companies. I've worked with a lot of them, and they're great. So let's talk about some of the steps you took along the way to become a CRO.
Yeah, of course. So steps I've taken. So the first thing I did is I got really good at being an account executive. And so for, gosh, I tried banking in my early 20s and found out it wasn't me. But the one thing I did find valuable about my experience in the banking world in my 20s was sales. So I got into sales accidentally. And there's a book that was once recommended to me when I left banking and went into sales at a company called Paychecks, HR outsourcing kind of company. And it was called The Accidental Salesperson. And I can definitely relate to that. I had no desire as a college or even like a teenager to go into sales. I did not really like talking to people that much, especially people I didn't know or older people, right? That was intimidating for me. And I learned to get over that when I tried banking. I had to basically do a lot of cold calling, and I was cold calling people who I thought had net worths that were pretty good because we sold, to high net worth individuals, and it was 2002. And so a lot of people lost a lot of paper money in that year. And so I just got good at not getting people to hang up on me. And that was the first thing that I thought was kind of cool. And the other thing I thought was cool about sales is that like you control your own destiny, right? At the end of the day, as long as you're selling something that you believe in is going to help people. And, if you try hard, it is very possible that you can be successful and make a really good living.
That's always so interesting to me because I do not have the personality type to be in sales and very much admire the people who are in that position and work closely with them. But I always viewed it as maybe not controlling your own destiny because you're really relying on somebody else to make a favorable decision. But the way you're putting it, that's a much better way to look at things. And so much about life is about mindset.
I totally, yes. And I've worked really hard on having a stable and positive mindset over the last 20 years in sales. One of the things that I found, though, was that early in my career, we used to track, and this is before, we didn't have a CRM and all of this. So I'm dating myself, we're mid 2000s, not many companies had a Salesforce, so on. And so we didn't have that. But one thing I did was I had like a little piece of paper, and every day I would track the amount of calls I did, the amount of business meetings I did. And I would track all these activities, and it was pretty linear in that if I did X, Y, and Z, I would be successful in the role. And so during my time at Paychecks, I was able to make President's Club every year I was there. And a lot of it was just putting in the work. And you have to get good at handling rejection. don't take it personally. And if you can, shift your mindset saying, oh, well, somebody said no, this is great. That means the next person is going to say yes. And you definitely need to, be resilient. And also, if you work hard, you're likely to be successful. And I think it's important for people in sales to also go and learn from other people. Right. And now that we have access to, LinkedIn and so on, you can follow influencers, you can, ask for time, you can go find the best reps in the company and just ask them, like, how do you sell? Everyone sells differently. And so you got to figure out what works for you. You have to be authentic. People aren't going to buy from you if they don't like you or if they don't feel you're authentic. And so not everyone's going to like you. That's okay. The best thing you can do is be authentic, and, that's going to resonate. And also, lead with value. At the end of the day, like, you have to understand who you're selling to, what their persona is, what their pains are. And if you explain to them, like, I understand what you're dealing with. I have hundreds of customers or dozens of customers, depending on, how big the business is. Like, we get it. And that is why we're in business. And let me show you how we can help you. Most people are gonna, we're all humans, or, they're gonna be receptive to that kind of messaging. And so to answer your question, I know that was long-winded, but yeah.
No, it's great. And I'm going to go a little bit off script here. I'm just curious to see your observations, because I know I've been seeing some things that appear to become trends, but have you noticed that what works in sales, I think it's very similar with marketing, where the core fundamentals and nailing the basics is always very important and stays pretty similar over time. But the actual tactics and mechanics of it seem to have changed, especially with PLG companies being a big example of this. Have you also known that, or seen, not known, well, maybe known, that the mechanics have been evolving lately?
Well, there's a big shift happening right now. And I think there's several reasons for it. One, VC money is not cheap like it was, right? And so, last year, a lot of companies were hiring and offering really expensive packages to account executives that had never really sold or had success, right? But there was a shortage, and so people were overspending. And so that led to a lot of difficulties for a lot of businesses to, stay competitive and also handle that. And it's unfortunate that so many people, overhired, because then a lot of people were affected by it. But the first thing is the old way of selling, enterprise selling, right? I wrote actually a post about this that was published today, was on the fact that, buyers want to buy differently than the way that they've been buying for the last 20 years. Enterprise selling motion, where you have a quality, you have BDR, and then you have an AE, and then, hopefully you get your hands on being able to see a demo, but like, you're investing hours and hours and you still don't have a chance to touch the product, right? And so that is not being very buyer friendly. And so that is, even though companies who work and go to market with a sales-led motion are more profitable from a CAC perspective, there's data around that. PLG works great, where the buyer can get their hands on the tool without talking to somebody. That's a first step. The issue that happens there is that the buyer then has to do all the work, and you have to invest like tons of hours just to see if it works. And if you are uncertain which vendor you're going to go with, and you're evaluating 3 or 4 different vendors, you're not going to download 4 free different trials and build up 4 different instances, because that's not going to be a good use of your time. And so I think that there's a future, which at TestBox we're calling it customer-led growth, which is really putting the customer at the forefront of the experience, and it's improving on the gaps that I see in PLG. And those gaps are around putting all the work on the prospect to get a shell of an account, and then make it do the work to see if it works for their business. And so what we're doing here is we're basically leveraging PLG, in that we spit up instances of products, and then we inject it with data and use cases based on what the buyers are typically buying these tools for, care most about. And now the buyer can basically play with a full-on baked out instance of the product, the real product, the full product. It's got dummy data in there, but they can test reporting, capabilities. They can look at integrations. They can collaborate with other stakeholders, right? Because nobody's buying software in a vacuum, right? There's now a bunch of people involved in evaluating software, and the more expensive your software is, the more people are going to get involved. And so we're giving the ability to companies to really collaborate in these instances and figure out, like, is this good for me? And the cool thing, it takes 2 seconds to roll out, right? And so you just click on a button, take it, inject the data, and then they have a full live demo instance of the product, and they can go around and figure out, is this a good use of my time? And if it is, then they can engage with sales at that point, or if they have questions about functionality and so on. And on the flip side, it also gives really good data to the product team, because now the product team can see, like, where are buyers spending most of their time, right? And so now they can leverage this for better marketing campaigns, right, that are addressing the pains of the personas. But they can also see, like, what are the things in the product where people are getting stuck, and that is something that is valuable. PLG overall, like I said, I love the concept. The issue is, like, from a conversion standpoint, it's pretty low, right? That most companies, from every instance that gets created to ends up with a paying customer, the percentage are usually in single digits or low teens, and that is really low. The other thing is that they're not as profitable as sales led, and so you'll see a bunch of content online now about PLG plus sales led, and I think that there's going to be a lot of changes, and sales teams, as well as marketing teams and product teams, are going to have to adapt to the new environment, because a lot of new buyers, millennials now have more and more budget. They don't like getting on the phone and talking to 5 different vendors and spending 10 hours in calls just to see what the product does, right?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I set you up beautifully for TestBox, but but also that really resonates with what I'm seeing in the market, along with, it's been interesting and awkward. I think there's always going to be a place for salespeople. PLG is not the death of sales by any means. I think more and more PLG companies will realize that sales they need to bring sales into the fold in order to function well. The other thing I'm also noticing, and wondering if you've also been seeing, is that some of these PLG companies, I feel there are some notable success stories. Zoom, Scratchpad, Dooley, like, there's a lot of examples where they've worked really well, and they do also have a sales portion in most of those examples. But what I've noticed is the companies that tend to struggle, it seems like they don't talk to their customers as much, or they're not really understanding the personas and really nailing the psychological side that both sales and marketing can help with. They're relying a little too heavily on the technology, and it's similar with, like, Chat GPT. When I see something new and fresh come out and people get super excited about it, it's yes, there are absolutely uses for that, but we're not quite at the point where we can remove all the humans from everything. So
I don't think we'll ever be at a point in B2B software specifically where you won't need salespeople.
Yep.
I think you'll need less of them. I think that companies will be able to scale more efficiently, which is what the VCs want nowadays, right? And the good old days of the 50x multiple valuations are gone, and I don't know if they'll ever come back. So scaling a company effectively and efficiently is going to be critical. And so I do think that there needs to be a way for PLG where people can get their hands on the product. Ideally, they have fully baked out instances with dummy data, because that removes friction. But the reps are the ones that are going to be evaluating this data, and in PLG they call it product qualified leads, right? Yep. PQL. And then I remember meeting with an executive, Van Zant at Asana, and this is back in the day. I was at Flip Talk during those days, but Asana was brand new, and they had all these users that were using the product. They didn't know how to monetize it, and now Asana been very, very successful, and companies have built similar products that have also been very successful and, enjoy, billion-dollar valuations. But in order to make sure that your PLG motion is going to work, you need people to identify and look at the data and see who is an ICP, right? And how are they using the product, and then come up with, cool ways to get them on the phone, better understand how they're using it, why they're using it, and then offer them, what you would categorize as, enterprise functionality, right? Where, SSO or any of the things that, larger vendors will require. And then you just say, oh, well, that's a paid plan, and, let's see how many people we can get on it. But it all starts with, getting a product that people want to engage with, and then tracking the behavior of those buyers. And on the marketing front, you have to understand the personas.
Yeah.
Right? And that is critical. And that comes from, like you said, talking to customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reading reviews on review sites. You get a lot of really good, valuable information. I would just filter from like not 5-star reviews, or 4-star reviews. Just look at like
the honest people.
Well, or the people that have issues with it. And some people
right.
Product, right? But I do think that there's too many 5-star reviews on review platforms overall.
Yeah, yeah. And you have to like consider people. I think it's like food reviews, right? People who have a really great experience or really bad experience are going to leave the review, and the truth is somewhere in the middle most of the time. Yeah. But yes, talking to people can really help you get to the bottom of that much faster than just crunching numbers. I like it. Art and science, always the best way to go. So I think it's a pretty natural segue into talking about the job description of a CRO, because their whole purpose in life is to help companies scale efficiently. Let's talk a bit about what all you have to tackle on a month-to-month basis.
Yeah, no. So the CRO position will vary at different companies.
Yep.
And so that's one thing to understand. But at the end of the day, I think there's like a handful of critical elements that a CRO needs to manage. And so first one is the funnel, right? And so there's a marketing funnel, there's a sales funnel. So let's start with the sales funnel first, right? And figure out the amount of leads that you get a month, or the amount of opportunities or first meetings that you get a month. How many are coming inbound? How many are coming outbound? What is the conversion rate of each, right? Because obviously you want to spend time on optimizing average sales price, ASP, as well as time to close. And so you want to figure out what the differences are from inbound versus outbound. Better understanding like what is the messaging that's being used by BDRs. So BDRs now sometimes on the marketing front, sometimes on the sales front. And so it really, depends, but I do think marketers should be, playing a huge role in, the messaging that is being used as it relates to each persona. And so first thing, as a CRO is like, how much pipeline are we generating, and what are all the conversions through the funnel? And then figuring out where can I make modifications, where can we improve? So that's more on the, the biz dev side. Now there's marketing alignment. And I've been in MarTech for, like 12 years now. And I've talked to thousands of software companies about, buying different types of products that companies have been at. And CRO and CMO alignment, it's shocking how often they're not aligned.
Oh, could echo that 100%. And I'm looking at it from the marketing side of the house too. So I would agree with you completely.
So that is the thing, right? So marketing is measured on, historically they're measured on leads and sometimes vanity metrics like impressions. And, at the end of the day, like I think marketers should be measured on revenue. Right? So revenue that you have generated, and you need to look at the conversions across it. But let's go back, historically, and 5 years ago, it's like, all right, how many leads am I generating? And then you look at how many leads are turning into MQLs. And if marketing owns that, I'm sure most leads are going to be MQLs. And then MQLs to SQLs, what is the drop-off rate there? And then SQLs.
Depends on the marketer, I would say. I would say, like, those of us who actually understand that the goal of the business and what the board cares about is pipeline and bookings, look at MQL distribution a lot differently, right? So it's not a volume thing. We're looking for quality and conversion rates. Yep.
And then what is, the cost of generating pipeline, either
Mm,
inbound versus outbound? Because in some cases, maybe outbound is better. It's rare, but like it could be right. But you need to look at the efficiencies of where you're spending your dollars, what channels are working,
yep.
and then what types of leads. And so the CRO and the CMO need to be super aligned, and that is critical to a company's ability to be super successful and then agile, right? Because stuff changes. Just look at what's
Mhm.
happened to SaaS in the last 3 years. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been in it for a while, but I had never seen, a pandemic followed by, huge bull market into, massive recession. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. I think the bold market was the big surprise. We expected the recession, things bounced back. We're like, this is great. And then it was like the housing bubble. Eventually, what goes up must come down. And now, yeah, no, I haven't had to pivot so quickly in our ideal customer profile and the personas we were targeting as I did this year. Like, our normal stakeholders lost all their purchasing power, and now CFOs are involved in every large purchase. So you have to change everything. Absolutely. No, it's been weird.
yeah, CFOs are really tough to convince to buy stuff,
Oh, yeah.
especially right now. And so what the other thing is, you need to understand where churn happens. And so this is critical to, being a CRO is, you segment your revenue into, SMB, mid-market, enterprise, or however the structure makes sense for that business. And then you need to look at, what is your customer acquisition cost in each, what is, your revenue in each, and then what is your churn rate in each of these categories. And a lot of companies I've been talking to recently are like, well, churn for us is really bad on the SMB, which obviously it happens quite frequently for a variety of reasons. They're less stable as companies, and that's
Yeah.
usually the number one reason. So they're like all trying to go up market now. But if you're all going to go try and sell, just like 1,000 companies, and before your ICP was 100,000 company, it's going to be really hard because one, you're going to have very long sales cycle. If your
Yep.
product is not ready to handle all of the technical functionality that an enterprise vendor is going to require from you, then you got to make changes to the roadmap. Your revenue is not going to grow nearly as much, right? And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of companies is like, oh, well, our best, our stickiest, customers are in the enterprise space. So the issue there is like all of your competitors, and depending on how established your space is, it could be 10 vendors, it could be 100, right? In MarTech, there's what, 10,000 companies now.
Yeah.
And if everyone's going after the same companies because the churn is less, like, I don't think you're going to be successful in the
No.
CRO role if you do everything that everyone else is doing. So
Right.
churn, account management, and CS is critical to, being able to handle the responsibilities of this role.
Yeah, I like your point about it's not always good to be all things to all people. Figuring out, if your product has a niche that it operates really well in, maybe you narrow your target market and you just knock it out of the park with that market. I don't know. Like, I like it. All right. So we talked about the sales, the marketing side, balancing the two, coordinating partnerships. Let's talk about some of the other things you're responsible for, sitting in on QBRs, relationship building, all of these
Yeah.
wonderful things. Tell
I mean,
me, like, what's the average day look like for you? Like, are you spending a big chunk relationship building versus actual tactical, strategic to tactical?
yeah, it depends on the stage of the company.
Mhm.
So whenever I join a company on the earlier side, one, I have to figure out like what's the messaging we use, what's our ICP, who are we going to sell this to. So in the beginning, when I joined, this is why I keep going to the small companies, because I really enjoy like the problem solving aspect of, how can we make this a must-have product that addresses many of the needs that, software companies have. So in the beginning, a lot of it's just get on the phone and just talking to, as many people as I can about what they're struggling with, and seeing if, I can give them a solution to, their pains and their problems. As a team evolves, like at G2, I joined, we had 5 people in sales. By the time I left, there was 150 people, right? And so my job went from selling to, eventually managing teams. And then I was managing, VPs and directors because the team got so big. And so things will change, right? So CRO, I think, is a role that you give at a company that's like a Series B company and up, right? I see sometimes people are CRO at very early stage companies, and I don't think that necessarily makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Like at early stage, I don't even think a CMO makes sense because you're really looking for the player coach if you're really, really small and scrappy. So,
Yeah, but
yeah.
if you've been a CMO in the past and that's important to you, it's part of your identity, you're going to want it again. And so, you
Yeah.
know,
I mean,
so
there's some flexibility in the title. It's the mentality that really counts.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
So the role will vary depending on how big you are, right? So, but like if you're looking at a company like Outreach, right? The CRO there at Outreach is basically mostly internal. Like 80% of their job is internal. While in my role, 80% of my job is external, right?
Yeah.
I am speaking to as many people as possible. I'm going to trade shows and so on, right? I'm building, relationship with potential partners, which I'll dive into in a second. But I think the role changes, and it varies on the business. So it's hard to say, what how they should spend their time, but you know the most important part would be metrics. So like RevOps, I haven't talked about that right now, but like RevOps is by far the most important person to a CRO because they're going to get grilled by the CEO. They're going to get grilled
Yep.
by the board. And if they don't know those numbers, they need to hire somebody that can basically structure all of the formatting on terms of the reporting so that they can have
Yep.
access to answer questions super, super easily. And so RevOps is a critical component to ensuring that you can be a successful CRO.
Yeah, and let's talk for a couple minutes. Having come from RevOps, I can tell you this, the executives I've worked with that have done really, really well are really upfront and honest about what they don't know. So are there terms they're not familiar with? Are definitions different in this company than they are in other companies? Because they don't want to step on any landmines. And they're also receptive to the revenue operations person, if they're skilled and prove themselves, to really rely on them to give them the story behind the data. And that's just so much more valuable than just producing the report, is knowing like these numbers are different and here's the reasons why that might be is.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about, I know you touched on the funnel, but I really want to dig in there because I feel like that's the biggest, ripest area for revenue operations to dig into, especially immediately, because like you were talking about, when you understand conversion rates and sticking points and where things could be optimized, you're helping everyone, including
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. And I like calling my teams revenue teams, not sales teams or customer success teams or business development teams. It's revenue, and I like the fact that there used to be sales ops and marketing ops and sometimes customer success ops, and now it's kind of like just boiling up to RevOps, and many RevOps people now have a seat at the leadership table, right? Because the marketing funnel, right? You got to make sure your tech stack is working and everything's, all of the analytics and the data is able to flow, and then somebody's got to create a way to ingest that data. And so I'm very excited that RevOps is having a huge moment right now, and you can see that from the different types of softwares are being marketed to RevOps people, and the fact now that many RevOps people have a seat at the leadership table. So it's been really nice to see.
I'm glad to hear you say that because that's been a worry for me as we have all these really talented people in operations, and until today there really hasn't been an executive or leadership track that feels really meaningful. So I'm glad to hear you reinforce that that's a good thing.
Yeah, I was very fortunate at my last 2 companies that I worked at previously. At G2, I had a gentleman by the name of Brad Rosen, who was amazing at getting us, understanding, where the issues were and how we could, make improvements to the business. And we had really good conversations around, making our business more effective and efficient. And then at the last company I was at, Metadata, I got to work with Logan in the early days, and then Sam Boley, my last 18 months there. And I don't know that, I could have done, half the job that I was able to do in terms of delivering really, significant growth year over year without their help. And they also, help the CRO with, board meetings. And that's another thing you need to do as a CRO. You need to go to a board, and sometimes it's fun when, things are going well, and sometimes it's not fun. So
I've been in both of those.
yes, I have as well. And so just make sure that, you get your RevOps team members to help you with those slides, because you can segment the data a variety of ways, right? And you could say, hey, we're no longer going after SMB now because the churn rate's too high. So now our ARR is going down because this whole pocket of, revenue that we have, we no longer count it because the churn is too high. And so now, our ARR went down, but then all of the other metrics, CAC and all that look great. But our ARR went down by like 20%, because now SMB is no longer part of how we, recognize revenue. So they can help you with all these things to try to figure out, how to make the numbers look as best they can, and how to ensure that, the board is satisfied.
And so much of that is prepping your leader with the backstory and information that's there that they may not know because they're not as close to it. So how can you and I convince these RevOps people to be a little more proactive about how involved they are in the board process? So a lot of times, especially early on in the career, I feel people don't feel as comfortable, and they're just trying to check a box and make sure the slides look the way they should. That's not really, as executive leaders, what we're most valuing or necessarily looking for. And I would love for you to explain a little bit more about how RevOps can better partner with you in that process.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's like understanding, it's like a sales cycle. It's like understanding like who you're trying to, work with and do business with. I am not detail oriented. I do not like spending time in the weeds. And so I'm very upfront about this with my employer. I'm very upfront this with, the people that work on my team. And I'm like, I need people that, can compensate for my inability to really get down in the weeds. And so that's the thing. So if you are a RevOps person and you want to see the table, one thing to understand is like, how is the person I'm working with? How is my CRO? Like, what are they good at? What do they struggle with? And then come to them with like, a proposition to say like, hey, I can help you look better in front of your board. And, here's how I think we can do this. And once you know what their limitations are and what they're interested in doing, right? I like to spend time talking to customers and prospects. Like that's something that I really enjoy. And some CROs don't talk to customers and prospects. Like that's just not what they do. They're just really good at, building team and process and so on. But like, process is not one of my favorite things, although obviously I have to do a lot of it as, build companies. But that's definitely not one of the things that I, gear towards. So if you're in RevOps and you want an opportunity to get some face time with the leadership team or eventually with the board, I think it's important to develop a really good relationship with the CRO and the CMO. And those are probably the two people that you're working more closely with on a day-to-day. Figure out what their gaps are and then offer them solutions as to how you can make them look good. Because that's a really good value prop. If I had somebody came to me, he's like, hey, I noticed last board meeting wasn't great, and they had a lot of questions about things you couldn't answer. I'm like, let's work together in the future, and I can help you and prep you for the next meeting. I'll be like, that sounds great. So I think it's on a RevOps person to take the initiative here and really go to leadership and say, here's what I can do for you.
And if any CROs are listening, know what you don't know. I love how you said, I'm not a detail person. I'm upfront about that because everybody is going to perform better if we're honest about where we're at and what we like doing and what we don't like doing and where we could use some additional eyes.
It takes time though, right? I mean, I wouldn't say that, when, my early days when my career was, going up and to the right and I was getting opportunities, and I wouldn't do that. But now, if I take a role, I'll be very clear with the CEO, like, these are the things I'm really good at that I enjoy doing. And here's the things that, I can do, but I think we should probably give me some assistance so that, we can, deliver the value that you need.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. Olivier, thank you for being here. Where can people find TestBox and where can they find you online to network?
Yeah, so super active on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I don't spend that much time on Twitter, so it's not great there. And then testbox.com. So you can find us. So we're just getting started. See company there, but we are everything that we talked about at the beginning of the call. Those are things we're working on. So if you are anybody in your company is looking to improve efficiencies through your sales and marketing funnels by leveraging a customer-led growth platform, love to chat with you guys.
Wonderful.